Oh, hello. Welcome to another week of Beyond Technical. This week, we're going to be talking all about controllers. Now, I don't personally use every type of controller, so we brought in a special guest. If you please welcome with me to the show, Douglington. Hey guys. So, as I said, today we've got Doug joining us. So, thank you very much for being on the show, Doug. And the reason Doug's here is because Doug does something that most people can't do, and that's he plays Street Fighter with a PlayStation 3 controller. He uses that as opposed to a fight stick and has learned how to play on that. So I thought it'd be good to bring somebody in that could actually kind of give some perspective on what it's like to not immediately jump on the fight stick bandwagon. So for starters, though, let's actually take a look at the controllers we've got. So we've got the Hori Real Arcade Pro Fight Stick. This is the one you've seen on the show in the past. This is one I've been using since very early on in playing Street Fighter. And it's actually a pretty good stick. It's got all the Japanese parts. This is my PlayStation 3 version. There's also one for the Xbox 360. And it works really well. Now, when you're brand new to the game, you're going to think that this joystick's going to make all the difference in the world. And let me tell you right now, it doesn't. Doug will probably be able to give us a little better idea on that. But it helps your inputs, and it's definitely important, but mostly it's having all these buttons that kind of makes a fight stick worthwhile, because when you have all the buttons, you can, piano, you can do plinking, you can do double tapping, and that's kind of one of the things that's a little harder to do on a controller. But by no means should a controller be overlooked. There's some of the best players in the world, like if anybody knows who Wolfkrone is, look him up. He plays Sea Viper, easily one of the most technical characters in the game, and he uses a controller. So this is kind of my weapon of choice. But Doug, why don't you show us let's start with the Xbox controller. This is something that you might be using as well. And basically, it's got a very similar layout to the PlayStation controller. You've got your triples on the left and your heavy inputs on the right triggers, and then your lights in the middle. So I know you've used that. What do you think comparing the Xbox to the PlayStation controller?
Well, the biggest problem that I have, and the reason I prefer the PlayStation controller over the Xbox controller, is the analog sticks. They're kind of wonky for me. It's part of the reason I like the PlayStation controller overall for any game type is those analogs. They're not in line. I started playing games a long time ago with an NES, and that's just how I learned, so I was comfortable like that. And now that everything's gone to analog, with my left hand up here, I know a lot of people say that it's a lot easier because it's more ergonomic somehow, but I just find that the classical NES feel is more comfortable for me.
Yeah, that seems to be a really popular opinion, is a lot of the players that use controllers and don't use fight sticks, and you'll see them if you go to local tournaments and things like that, I haven't seen anyone use the Xbox controller yet. It's hands down PlayStation 3 controllers, and then even for Xbox tournaments, they just use an adapter. So that tends to be the kind of the most popular one. So Jill, you mind showing everybody the difference of the PlayStation and the Xbox controller? Here, we'll take that guy. So you got a little bit of a different layout. Now, the other thing about the PlayStation controller is a lot of people actually use the D-pad as well, so they like the positioning of the D-pad. It depends on what you're playing with, and there's a third option which we don't have here today, which is actually a fight pad. And what that is it's laid out much like a fight stick, where you've got all the buttons over here, but you have a D-pad up here, and it's a controller purely made for fighters that you can pick up as well. They're pretty cheap, about 30 or 40 bucks I've seen a few times, so that's kind of a good option. But Doug, you've got the controller. Now, in terms of playing with a controller over a fight stick, is there any kind of special tips or tricks or things you've learned that have made it easier to not have a full stick?
So far as tips or tricks, I do find that it's mostly personal preference. Like I said, I kind of started with the NES, and that's just where my comfort zone is.
Yeah.
I personally find that I play a lot of different types of games as opposed to just fighters, so I find that having my thumb do all of the work, or at least most of the work, is pretty comfortable for me.
Mm-hmm.
I do a lot of first-person shooters and action games, so it's very quick for me to jump from the analog to the buttons.
Yeah. Now, when we both first started playing the game, and you've been at it a little longer than I have, I've probably been a little more dedicated or hardcore into it than you, but how long did you find it took before you went from, having trouble with all the inputs to being able to reliably use your special moves and things like that?
I found it was pretty immediate, actually, jumping from completely sucking at Street Fighter, not knowing how to do anything, to being able to pull them off pretty consistently. One of the things that I actually tried, and some people might be familiar with, I have stick extenders for the PlayStation 3 controller. They basically add on about that much more It's used for precision in first-person shooters. So your thumbs are like out here. But I don't use them in fighters. Primarily, and it's actually part of why I don't use the joysticks. I find that it gives you almost too much leeway for... I find it takes longer to do an input. I can do an input much quicker if I have less space. One of the things that actually Street Fighter does that helps with that is shortcuts, where you can, like, if I want to do down to forward and then X, I can just bash down forward a bunch of times and it'll work just fine.
That's true. You can just kind of wiggle it down and use your shortcuts for that. That also lets you do some moves like Shoryuken without actually having to stand up. You can stay crouching the entire time and just do the wiggle, and those shortcuts do come in handy. You shouldn't rely on them solely. You should learn how to do inputs properly, but it's a nice way for kind of beginners to step in the game. So if you're having trouble, definitely try and use some of those shortcuts. Just wiggling the stick or the controller down in that direction will do it for you. Now, the big reason that we want to talk about controllers a lot today is because when you're new, it's tough to get into the game to begin with. Like, it's a very technical game. There's a lot of amazing players that are just going to demolish you when you hop online. And I know a lot of players feel like they have to spend $150 on a fight stick or they won't be able to compete. That's just not true. Now, the other one we've got here today is the Tournament Edition madcatz fight stick. Now, this is easily the more popular stick. This is the Xbox 360 version. And between the two, I've been using both of them lately. I just picked up an Xbox recently myself. And I kind of prefer the Hori stick. It's a little bit bigger, but the stick feels a little longer to me than the joystick that comes stock with the Tournament Edition. And the screws kind of poke out, which I find a little bit annoying, and the plate pops up a little bit, whereas the Hori's all flat. However, if you like customizing a stick, this is the stick for you. You can put custom artwork on, you can get custom cut plexiglass pieces, you can replace the buttons really easily, and if you buy the Xbox version, it's difficult by all means, but it's a lot easier in the PlayStation version to dual mod it so that this stick can work on PlayStations and Xboxes, so you can bring it to any sort of tournament you want. So between these two, I'd personally say it doesn't really matter which stick you go for. They're both pretty nice. So by all means, try out what you like. But if you're brand new to the game, stick with a controller. Like Doug here can play really well with a controller. I don't see him screw up inputs very often at all. As a matter of fact, he seems a little more consistent than I am. So, that you get used to it. The other thing I noticed too is after I started using a stick, like I bought a stick, and then the first week of playing Street Fighter, I immediately jumped on that bandwagon because I thought it was going to make a world of difference. And like it helped, it was nice. But after I've used a stick for a while, when I got the Xbox, I didn't have this fight stick yet. It was being shipped, and I played with an Xbox controller, and I could do all the inputs on an Xbox controller I'd never touched before. So it's just mostly a patience and timing thing. Over time, you'll learn kind of how to work with whatever you've got. And I find having the buttons is easily the most important thing to me. Mm-hmm. The other thing to note too, real quick, is the start button is on the end of a Tournament Edition. Well, it is actually on the top of a Real Arcade Pro. So if you are going to accidentally hit the start button, which I have done from time to time, it can get you disqualified in tournaments, so be careful of that one. But I find it's more of a habit to break, so even though it's on the front of the TE, you'll still reach forward and touch it.
On that note, it's just about impossible to do with a PlayStation 3 controller. I guess an Xbox controller too. There's really no way my thumb's going to jump up and
not
hit
accidentally.
That
you have pushed start a few times on matches
I have.
with me.
That's because I'm trying to skip through the cinematics.
Yeah, I know. It's always like a natural gamer instinct to kind of skip cutscenes.
Yeah.
So yeah, thanks for tuning in and checking out this episode. I hope this kind of answers a lot of questions about controllers. We've had a lot of them coming in, so we want to do an episode all about that. We've got some more exciting stuff coming up in the future and a few big tournaments kind of on the horizon. So I'm hoping to get some footage of that for you guys and show you a little bit of what the local scene is like. And thanks again to Doug for joining us today and explaining a little bit about controllers and stuff. So we'll see you guys next week, and keep those questions and comments coming because they're really handy. If you're looking for more information or more news, check us out. We've got a Facebook page. It'll be in the comment description or the video description. So check that out. Thanks for watching Beyond Technical, and we'll see you guys next week.